Okay, good morning, everybody. On this Erev Yom Kippur, we are going to be continuing on with Gemara Eruvin. We are on the top of Mem Tet Amud Aleph. Hopefully, everybody got through the Gemara on Mem Tet properly. Again, just to review. So the one on Mem, the Gemara Mem Tet was talking about the question of when you have multiple people. Having access to single rishos. Meaning basically when you have like three courtyards for the Mishnah. So in the or when there's three people sitting next to each other, which is how do they all interact? So and then there was a machloket as to whether the fact that they all made the two outer ones made an Eruv with the inner one, if that helps them all be able to share or not, and we discussed the reasons why not that would work. At the end, we concluded that it was the machloket between the Rabbi Shimon and the Chachamim. The Rabbi Shimon said that if you were to do this scenario, at least you can carry the outer people carry the inner person, whereas according to the Chachamim, all of the courtyards is prohibited because it's very easy for somebody to make a mistake. So that's why. So we differentiate between the case of courtyard versus just three people, because in the case of three people, it's much easier for you to remember and to properly remind each other that you carry past the allowed zone for each individual person. But when you have a large group of people, having zones that are allowed and not allowed tends to make things complicated. So we try and avoid that if at all possible. So next we have okay. So now we're on Mem Tet Amud Aleph Tanya. Kavate Rabbi Yehuda Ali ben Shmuel. So again, second line. So John and Beit to the Kohen of Rabbi Yehuda, and according to Shmuel, I'm Rabbi Shimon. So this is a restating of what we had from the Mishnah. We're going to explain as to how this all ties in, right? So Rabbi Shimon Lamad Davar Domet L'Shoshu Chaserot Abdukol Delazo Abdukol to the Rabbim. Shtayim im Emtzait, Zo Mevia Mitoch Beita V'Ochelet, V'Ze Mevia Mitoch Beita V'Ochelet, Tu Machzeret Motara Toch Beita, V'Zo Machzeret Motara Toch Beita. So, in the case of three people sitting on the ground is explainable what? It says where there's three courtyards that open to each other, but each of the courtyards are also open into Rosh Hashanah. So that's our case, and the question is, how does let me share a diagram quickly so everybody can figure out. So here we are. Okay, everybody sees this. So you see the right. So the basic case is so we see all the way on the right, diagram 28. So we see, there's three courtyards that relate to each other, leading to Starabim, and we also see that there's, the smaller squares, there's the houses. So that's the scenario. So we're saying now that people could actually return things into their houses, assuming that they everybody done their area properly, and they wouldn't forbid each other. Okay, so that's where we're currently at. Okay, so now let's continue on with explanation of this statement. Hopefully, this will make everything clear. So, okay, so the Gemara. So then, the Chacham said, in this exact case we're talking about, that they're not allowed to bring food from their houses into the courtyard, or the food or vice versa. So Shmuel Tameh, and Shmuel follows his opinion. Damar Shmuel Chatzer Sheben Shtei Mevavot Irva Im Shteihem Asura Im Shteihem. So Shmuel follows his opinion in general, as Shmuel stated, that if you have a courtyard that's between two different alleyways, and then you made an area between the two, and then the person who lives in the middle. People who live in the middle Chatzer made an area with the two alleyways on each side. It actually is forbidden with both. By making the Erev, you actually made yourself worse off. Again, so again, you see the picture here. This is our picture. We have, right, so we're talking about the people in this middle area in the Chatzer, right? So then so the problem is that by their making an Eruv on both sides, they actually ending up with no Eruv. So that's Shmuel's meaning that if there are three courtyards that mirror with each other, it's problematic, just like it is when you have the chutzner in the middle and there's two in the wall, right? So it makes sense that just like there, if you made, because you didn't make one joint one for everybody, but you said two separate ones, it creates a problem. But here too, it also creates a problem. So that helps us understand what Shmuel's opinion is. So low erva, okay, and then similarly, low irva im shteihem, oster al shteihem. Similarly, if the courtyard did not establish an eruv with either alleyway, it prohibits one to carry both of them. Basically, since normally you would have used one and you instead chose to use none of them, so by doing so, you actually make the mevorot two well, they're open to places they're not allowed to carry. And therefore, even in the mevorot, they're not allowed to carry. Like it prohibits the. It doesn't prohibit the. Yeah. So basically, then everybody ends up being having a problem because you have open usage, but you're not allowed to. One of the places you normally use one alleyway, not the other alleyway. On the other hand, if the people in this chatzer normally only use one of the not the other one, then the one that they normally use, if they did make an eruv with them, so that eruv would be considered to be forbidden, but the other eruv would not be forbidden. We said, because generally we only would say that you run into this issue if you have improperly, if you normally would have used the area. If it's an area that you wouldn't have normally accessed, then your ability to access, then you could walk there. We don't consider that to be a problem. Amar Rabba Baravuna, Irva im she'ena regila bo, hutar regila la'atzmo. Rabba Baravuna says, actually, that if you made an eruv with only one of them, with one you normally don't use, then it allows the one which you normally would have used on its own. Hutar regila la'atzmo. The one you normally would use is around starting that mavoi, you can still carry in that mavoi into their own lasero, but you can't carry there. So Amar Rabba Baravuna Amar Shmuel. Im irva regila la'atzma, zesh en regila bo lo irev, v'hi atzma lo irva, do chorota etzel she'en regila bo. Rabbi Bar Shmuel was other case that if the one that you normally if the mavoi that the chatzer normally uses made its own eruv, and the one that it normally and then the side and we're still in this case where there are three, right? Where there's a chatzer in the middle, two mavois. So normally, let's say you went out the left, the one that's on the left. So that one, but this job is the one on the left. They all decided to make an eruv. Your chatzer didn't make, but your chatzer is not a part of that eruv, and also the mavoi on the right didn't make an eruv either. Right. So now the question is, what do you do? So we say that the people of the chatzer are going to use the mavoi that doesn't have an eruv. That way, they'll walk out that way. And that way, they don't end up osering the mavoi that made an eruv, and everybody's actually allowed this one. That way, the mavoi on the left, their eruv will be functional, even though the eruv chatzerot, or the chatzer in the middle, will not be able to carry, and the mavoi on the right also not be able to carry. At least the one on the left will be able to carry, and that way, at least somebody is able to carry on Shabbos through use of their eruv chatzerot. Okay, if we're going to kof and that's dome. Okay, and this scenario is a case of where we force somebody to not act like people of Sodom. Because if you were to have exercised your normal rights of saying, "Oh, I normally use the ones on that side. I'm going to keep using the ones on that side. What we're actually doing is you're creating a problem for yourself. Because basically you gain nothing by going out on the left side like you normally do. All you're doing is making it so that nobody else on the left side is able to leave, which is just richness. It's just evil, right? Just you gain nothing from doing so besides making sure that other people can't carry in their eruv. So that's not okay thing to do. So Amar Yehuda Amar Shmuel Hamakbid Al Yeruvo Ein Eruvo Eruv. Okay. Bashmo Eruv Shmo. So Yehuda says, okay, so I think let me stop sharing because we're going off the part where we are using the that diagram. So now we have Yehuda and the name of Shmuel again, as we've been putting a lot. So if somebody is particular about their eruv, meaning he won't share with other people, his eruv is not an eruv. What is the name of the eruv? Mashmo eruv shmo, right? Eruv means that it's supposed to be jointly owned and everybody has usage of it. So if your eruv is the person who, let's say the person donated the box, like the modern day case, the person who donated the box of matzahs and who's setting up the eruv decides that he doesn't want anybody else to eat the matzah besides him. If he has that in mind, he makes the eruv, and that means that the eruv is no good. Because you have to have in mind that anybody who is part of the eruv is able to access the food. You can't simply say that nobody's allowed to access the eruv. If you do that, then your eruv is no good. Okay? So, Rechanina Amar Eruvo Eruv Lashnikra Man Shevardina. Okay, so Rechanina says, no, the eruv still works. But they're going to call you somebody from Vardina. So why is that? So apparently, people of Vardina were world renowned for being the misers. So it still would work. Just everybody's going to hate you. So okay, so again, that's not look at. In general, we say you should make sure that people both want whoever doing the eruv should both want to have whoever is part of the eruv to be able to access it. Also, make sure that's accessible, as is seen by the Mars were very quoted, where we run into issues if people can't access the. Amar Yehuda Amar Shmuel Hacholikat Eruvo Eno Eruv. So Yehuda says in Shmuel, someone who divides his eruv into multiple parts is not considered to be a valid eruv. So why is that? So now we're trying to figure out what does that mean and why is that no good. So come on, right? So why is it no good? Beit Shammai. According to Beit Shammai, Tanya Chamisha Gabot Eruvin Utanu B'Shnei Kelim. Beit Shammai Omrim Ein Ed Eruv. Beit Hillel Omrim Harez Eruv. So why is it a problem? You split your eruv in half. Like what could possibly be wrong with that? So we go back to the case of 5 people jointly contributed to making an eruv, and they put it in 2 separate utensils. But Shammai says this eruv is no good, but Beit Hillel says this is a valid eruv. So seemingly, the issue here is that if you put it into 2 separate groupings, that's a problem. Again, not that there's a problem. If you have if you put 5 small rolls in or 5 matzahs in a container, it's a problem. The problem is when you literally separate them to 2 separate locations. According to Beit Shammai, with 2 separate utensils. No. Then we're going to say, no, that's not the issue. It's not the issue of Beit Shammai. A few Jam Beit Hillel, Ad Kol Kamer Beit Hillel, Atam Ela de Malyan, Lamana, Veiter. Hands of that Palik, Biflag, Low. You can say that when Beit Hillel says that it's okay if you put it into 2 utensils, that's if you had so much food for eruv that it didn't fit into 1. So what are you going to do? You have too much food, so you put it into 2 utensils. But it's only if that's because you ran out of space. But if you just simply put it into separate utensils because you're trying to say that, one is for this person, one is for that person, and you're dividing the eruv according to the separate parts, that's a problem. Why do we need both these statements about that you can't be mocked on your eruv? You can't fit separate. You have to be mocked, but you can't be mocked by your eruv that you can't divide into parts. Like, what do you need them both for? 3 feet. We need them both. The ESPN and Hata Mishum Dakapi. Maybe the issue of the person who's particular is because he's being stingy, and that's the problem. But here, we just put it in two. You're not being stingy. You're just like, you broke it up. So later on, whenever it comes to their Eruv, they don't have to fight over and break it up later. But therefore, you need them both. If you said the problem is by the case, only case we knew of was the case where it's split in half. In the polygamific, probably you split the food in half already. You said no. Who cares if you're being particular about it? And then if the Eruv is a full Eruv, that's the right amount. It doesn't matter. No, so it's three. So therefore, when you both teach you both, there's a problem if you were to not allow you to divide up if you won't let other people to eat from the Eruv is a problem. It's also a problem if you were to have divided the Eruv into parts prior to Shabbos. You're supposed to have left it be in one location and allow before Shabbos. Amrle Rabbi Abba, Rabbi Yehuda, Beit, Adzarta, the Beit Rabbi Zakkai. Okay, so the story is Rabbi Abba said to Rabbi Yehuda, and in the olive press by Rabbi Zakkai's house. So I guess there's a middle of pressing olives. This was happening. Who said that if somebody divides who said the Shmuel said if you divide your Eruv, it's not considered to be valid Eruv? Amar Shmuel, Ba'ash Michael Eruv, and it's Sarth Litan at Tafah. So, just as the case in Shmuel state elsewhere, there's a place where you place the Eruv, that house doesn't need to contribute to any of the bread. My time, Allah Mishum da Amar Kim the Manach Masala, Kaman the Manach Achadami. Hanami given the Namach Masala, Kaman the Manach Achadami. So Shmuel said that if the person whose house is hosting the Eruv doesn't need to contribute towards the total amount of bread. You can't force the person who's hosting it to contribute bread, but assuming that, but again, you'll still have to make sure the requisite amount anyways. So would that not? So how'd that work? So maybe you'll say that this is because the person whose food that airs in their house, we say that their other bread in their house counts towards the total amount, even though it's not in the same basket as everybody else's. Shouldn't we say that just like it works there, where that person's bread's in their cupboard, whereas this person's got their bread in there, whoever else's bread is in the common basket? Say it goes together. So shouldn't we say in general that it doesn't matter if it's in two locations, as long as it's all in the same person's house, it should be fine. So what do you mean that Shmuel says is a problem if it's your Eruv is split? Amrlai hatam avabish and pot my tama dekulu hacha diary. No, actually we say that it works even if there's no bread in the house which the Eruv is placed, meaning there's no extra bread besides the even the person didn't have his own bread, like the person who's hosting doesn't have his own sort of bread to contribute, it still works. Why? Because we say that everybody's living in that house. They're all living in that house. They're all, residing there. So as soon as they already hit the prerequisite amount for, again, we'll hopefully get to soon about the prerequisite amount of the bread you need. And you don't need to worry about. It. So, okay. So now that we have that, so now everything's clear. Yes, more or less. Okay, right. So again, so when you're placing the Eruv, one place, and that way it's all clear that everybody's got a part of it, and nobody's being picked about to another person, and that way we can all be part of the Eruv all together. Not any issues. Okay, so now that once we discussed that, now we're going to finally get to we get to the question of how does Eruv actually work. Amar Shmuel, Eruv Mishum Kinyan. Shmuel says the way that an Eruv works is due to the laws of Kinyan and the laws of acquiring. So what does that mean? It means that basically that by making the Eruv, everybody acquires the ability to use that house as if it is their own, or they acquire the rights to use the residence as if it's their own. Again, you guys subject to my look at and really how to interpret what it means. If we have time, I'll give more time at the end, but I'm not sure we'll have enough time. So if you want to say that the way that Eruv works is because of kinyan. So why can't you simply pay your way in? Right? Give the guy some money, and then you be part of the Eruv. So we say it's because even if you have a ma, basically the issue, why don't we say you're supposed to make the Eruv with bread instead of money if really the whole purpose is to buy, right? So the answer is because most people don't have their extra money lying around in their Shabbos because they spent it already for Shabbos. So actually they'll probably only be able to afford the bread that they're going to end up using on Shabbos, so that's all they have left to contribute. So that's why we say you're not supposed to use money, you're supposed to use bread. So okay, so right? So according to but fine, you ideally shouldn't use it that way, but according to it should work. Even though ideally you shouldn't, but it should still work. No, why won't we let you pay in to use an Eruv? I know the issue is we don't let you make an Eruv with money because sometimes the person might not have money and then they'll forget about it. Then they won't remember to do the Eruv they won't remember to contribute enough bread for the Eruv, and then therefore you'll wind up having an Eruv that is forgotten, and therefore people will not end up doing Eruv properly, and we don't want that to happen. Therefore, we're going to say always contribute bread. Okay. So then we have right. So again, so nowadays when there's thing as an Eruv fund, that's typically not for the purposes of buying the matzahs, because that's normally not a large expense. Normally, that's more towards the upkeep of the Eruv and making sure that somebody can go have the funds to fix it up, and also in terms of in case something, sometimes you need somebody to make the repairs, and that's the one with the Eruv fund is stored. Nowadays it's not, but when you pay the Eruv fund, it's not because you're actually contributing towards the food itself. Normally that's a relatively minor sum. Okay, so now we have one opinion for how Eruv works is that Eruv is mishum kinyan. It works by means of acquisitions, so meaning that you're either buying the rights to the location, or you're buying an actual, or buying as if, let's say, if you're not, when you're buying, like when you're like renting somewhere. That's the way it works. It's working because of the monetary aspect. Well, there's another aspect. There'll be another reason. Rabba Amar Eruv mishum dira. Rabba argues that he says, actually, Eruv works because of the question of your residence of your house, meaning that by making the Eruv, you're saying that this is now my house. So, right. So by placing my bread there, it's now that we are all now living in one house. We're all in one collective area as one big residence, and that's why that's why it works. Not because you're paying in. Rather because you are moving your house to that house. So my benayo. So what's the difference between whether or not you believe it's because of dira or mishum kinyan? Benayo, the difference is in regards to a utensil, right? Can you make an Eruv with giving somebody a utensil as opposed to giving them actual food? If you say it's because of monetary, then because of kinyan, then theoretically you could use a utensil as your contribution. But whereas if the whole thing is to establish it as your dira, you can only establish it as your home with bread. No other thing will work to make the Eruv Chaserot be your home. Right? So again, this is always within Eruv Chaserot. Now it's an Eruv Tchumen. Right? So again, Tchumen we said was about making it your place of residence, Shabbos, but it wasn't a part of it being a collective thing. Whereas for now, when we're doing it for Eruv Chaserot, the point is that it's a collective. That we are all now part of the same area. The question is, do we say we're all part of the same area because we all paid into the collective, or is it because we are all living in the same location? Okay, and so another difference is if you're saying in regards to a kinyan, then you've got a problem because if it's mishum kinyan, anything less than a pruta doesn't count as a proper kinyan. It's not a proper acquisition, On the other hand, if you were to say it's about food, contributing food, let's say that's where my house is, so even if your food happens to be worth very little, that still would be sufficient. Another one would be turning the page, katan. Another one would be by katan. Is he allowed to? Is the katan allowed to collect the eruv for? We go around and collect everybody's bread. So if you say it's because of kinyan, so then it's a problem because a katan can't be a shaliach for the sake of a kinyan. But if it's basically the whole thing is based off of dira, so basically all you're doing is using the kid as as somebody to deliver your food to your house, which does not require the person to be a bar da'at. The only thing that matters is they can get the food to the location that's needed. Okay, so Amr le Abaye l'Rabba. So then Abaye said to Rabba, "L'ditzah kasha, l'shmuel kasha." So then Abaye questions both of those opinions. So what's the question from Hatayan? In the bright so Misha should go with the Eruvin. Chaim will listen at the Eruvin l'makom acher. Echad molech l'kulan. So we learned that if five people collected, five different people collected for the Eruv, so when they're bringing the Eruv to another location, you can send it with only one of them. All five don't need to go. Okay, who knew the kani batulo? Right, so that one individual can acquire the Eruv for everybody else, but they can't. Who knew the kadair batulo? So that would imply that only one person can acquire the rights. The person gains rights is somebody else. So if that's the case, that he's the only one doing everything, then what do you mean that everybody else is acquiring through this one person? How does that work? Rabbi responds, no, it's not a problem for that part that you're quoting is not an issue for me, nor is it an issue for Shmuel. When we're saying that the five people collected and then the one person collected, all that happens is that really the last person is the one who makes the air going to effect is because everybody, we just keep having people being designated as the shaliach, as the messenger to fulfill the air. Initially, it was just one person, and then it was right. So initially it was five people, but then the five people said designate one of the five because there's no need for all five of them to go bring in. But really, it should work. It would work. So that's not a problem. So Amar Rabba, Amar Chama Bar Guria, Amar Rav, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabba. So then Rabbi Chama Bar Guria, then Rav. It's like Rabbi Shimon. Meaning that you're allowed that the case of the three courtyards where the middle one made an Eruv with the middle one made an Eruv with the two outer ones, the outer ones did not make an Eruv with each other. The middle courtyard is allowed to carry into either outer courtyard, vice versa, but the outer courtyards cannot carry from one to the other one. We don't have the transitive property would work. Okay, so now we're talking. Okay, now we're going back to the question of Eruv Tchumen, no longer Eruv Hatzarot, and we're talking about a case of where you are not yet somewhere where you're trying to determine the Eruv is not based on your actual placement, based on your knowledge of the location. So Misha Baba B'der Klash Kalal, somebody's coming from distance. Then it gets dark on them, and then it's approaching Shabbos, and they're not quite there. I makir Elon Ogader Bamar Shviat Hitav Lo Amar Klok. So a person is coming from this is late for Shabbos, and they want to make sure they can make it home. So they try and say that they know there's a tree or a fence on the way, and they say that I'm going to reside beneath the tree, rather where you're currently standing. It doesn't work. You said nothing. Right, and you see the diagram. That's the guy who's looking, and he's like, "Oh, I know there's that nice fence tree." So he says, "That's no." So if you say, "I'm residing beneath it," that's no good. If you said that I'm residing at the base of it, not underneath it, Mahalach v'makom raglav adi karon alpayim ama mikaro v'adbeto alpayim ama. Means Mahalach v'shalshecha arba alafim ama. But if you use the proper language of I'm going to reside by its base. as opposed to underneath it, then that would work. Again, so look at the diagram. So Taftav, right, maybe just underneath the tree, that's considered to be a problem. If you use that language, you say if you say by its base, that would be considered to be where the aleph is, right? So if you had in mind literally right underneath the tree, that's a problem. If you had in mind the area underneath, let's say the branches, but not the tree itself, that would be allowed. That would be okay. So eno makir or she'eno baki b'halacha. Amar shvitati b'mkomi zakalo mkomo paim amalcha ruach. But let's say if you didn't recognize the location, or simply you didn't know the proper formulation, you don't want to get yourself stuck by saying the wrong thing. So if you said I am residing where I am now, that means that you have 2,000 amot from where you currently are in every direction. And then if you happen to make it, and then if you have within 2,000 amot of the town, then that's great. And if not, well, that's as far as you can walk. It's 2,000 amot around your current location. But it's better than being stuck with only 4. So we say the 2,000 amot question is, then how do we measure them? Gula, Divrei Rabbi Tzveina ben Antignos, Chamer Mim Rabaot, Kitav Rabat, Deish Yunishkar Naviyot. So Rabbi Tzveina ben Antignos says that you simply get a circle with a radius of 2,000. Where the Chachamim say actually you also gain the corners. That way you get a much like a square board. Right, that's a katav murabat, which means basically, so you end up getting see where the little aleph is. So those are the corners that you would gain. So the corners, instead of it being 2,000, you actually get 2,000 times 1.4 square root of 2. So you end up getting, instead of getting 2,000, and the corners you'll end up getting actually 2,800. So therefore you get there's a lot of extra area you'll be getting. For the exact difference in area, so that's the difference between it's pi r squared versus 2 times r squared. Again, exact math. It would be 2 times 4,000. It would be 2 times 4,000 squared. It would be 13,000 square meters as opposed to the other one, which is only going to being around 18,000. Anyways, that's the math. If you'd like to do it more precisely, you're welcome to. That's the geometry problem, which I want to make sure we can get through we'll get more in terms of the mathematics when we get to the Gemara and discuss how to measure everything. So again, don't worry, we will properly do our math, just not right now. Okay. So the Zohi Shamru Hanimar Baraklav. And so similarly, we said that when a poor person can make an error with his feet, that's the case we mentioned before of Shvitativ and Komi. Rabbi Meir, Anu Aim Lano Ela Ani. So Rabbi Meir says no, this is only for a poor person literally. People can't normally do that. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Achadani Bechadashir Lo Amru Ma'arvim Pat El Hakal Ashir Shelo Yetzev Yarei B'Raglav. Rabbi Yehuda argues and he says, again, this statement had come up earlier, but again, this is where the original location is. The Mishnah. So whether the person be poor or rich, you can do an error with your feet or by means of by bread. But the only reason why they instituted the making error with bread is in order to make it easier for the person who has the means. That way they could have somebody else go out and establish error on their behalf, as opposed to the person having to walk themselves. So okay, so now we're going to try and figure out what exactly the Mishnah meant. When we're saying that when you said shvitati tachtav, it doesn't work. So my lo amar klom. What do we mean that when you said it, your Eruv doesn't work at all? Amarav lo amar klom kolikar da'afilu lo tachtav shlilan lo matzi azil. So Rav says we said it did really nothing. It means that you can't even get to the place where he specified. He actually only gets his dalad amot where it currently is, and that's it. Could you make your condition wrong? Not that you default back to the 2,000 from your location is. You actually are in the same boat as a person who forgot to make an Eruv, sorry, forgot to, the person, the case we had before, the person fell asleep at Shabbos, and according to the opinions that he gets nothing if he doesn't actively have in mind that he's residing in this location. So say he gets absolutely nothing, he made the Eruv in the wrong place. Where you intent in the wrong place, that's the worst of all worlds, and you get only your Dalet Amot. So yeah, don't do that. So Shmuel Amar, Lo Amar, Klum Veto, Aval Tatav, Shalilan, Matziazil. Yeah, but Shmuel says no, that's not the case. Rather, you didn't do anything that's helpful in order to get you all the way home. But if the tree is filled into 2,000 Amot, you can still walk to that tree because the 2,000 Amot are determined based on where you're standing, not based on the final location. So, and we say that when you made the Eruv, you are become if you made the Eruv in the wrong place, basically you end up becoming a Chamar Gamal, meaning you're going to push both directions. Since you made a mistake, you end up getting the worst of all the worlds, which is definitely not what you want. So, Balim Dod Min Hatzafon, Modin Lo Min Hadarom. Balim Dod Min Hadarom, Modin Lo Min Hatzafon. So therefore, what happens if you did it wrong? So if you are measuring 2,000 amot from the tree from the north, so basically you would measure it from the south, and similarly, if you were turning from the south, you get from the north. Basically, so his opinion is that now we're what actually is happening is you end up getting the lesser of between the place that you wanted to go, the tree, and where you currently are. So whereas before, if you said I'm simply resigning my location, you'd have gotten the 2,000, the 2,000 amot around you in every direction. But because you tried to and improperly made your Eruv underneath the tree, you actually only end up getting you only end up getting 2,000 in the 2,000 in between, as opposed to getting your 4,000 all the way around. So you get the worst scenario. Let's see. Do we have a? Here we go. Right. So here, these are our diagrams, right? So, right. So normally you were here. So you were trying to go from here. So you were trying to go from what you ideally wanted to do is go from your house to the tree and then to home, right? Which is roughly 4,000 away from you. Instead, what you ended up doing is you ended up messing up, and therefore instead you ended up getting just the you end up just getting the 2,000 in between. Whereas before you'd have gotten 4,000. Yeah, we have this diagram here of the all the way around you, but instead you just get there to you in the tree and you lose everything else. It's not what you wanted, but that's what you get for not doing it correctly. Okay, so now a little bit on Nun Amud Aleph. Amarabba, my time at the Rab, Mishum, Lomasai Matre. So why is it that you end up getting nothing at all if you had tried establishing under the tree? So it's because you had not designated a precise place, and since your place wasn't like you can't actually reside beneath the tree. That's not a location you can be, right? You can be beneath its branches, you can be by its base, but you can't really sleep underneath the tree because it's connected to the ground there. Another option is why doesn't it work? Because you need to say that you are establishing the area in a precise location, and underneath the tree is not sufficient. Is not you can't be both underneath the tree and in a valid location at the same time. So because of that, it would not work to be at the tree. Also, the tree is too large as well if you include the whole tree. So could you specify the properly sized location? Therefore, you wind up with an issue because underneath the tree is normally more than Dalet Amot. If you include the whole, since we typically would include the branches as well. Okay, so I just want to revisit what we mentioned before about the question of how does an Eruv work. One moment while I just want to pull up my. One second. I have a. Where was it? Oh, there we go. Okay. because I just want to go over again the differences between, because we mentioned the fact that the way that an Eruv works, the difference between an Eruv being Mishum Dira versus it being Mishum, right? Is the Eruv Mishum Dira, or is the Eruv Mishum Kinyan? So I just wanted to go through with everybody what that means a little bit. One moment while I find the relevant part in the document. It's actually, it's in, so second, it's in Hebrew. One moment while there we go. Here, so I'm going to share a document again. This may sound better than the first year we did on Eruvin. Again, hopefully I'll send out this document if people are so you can read it if you're interested. Again, it's quite long. It's basically it's general things on the way that Eruvs work. So again, there was the question of, does the Eruv work because of kinyan or because of dira? Right? Does it work by means of a mechanical acquisition, or does it work by means of everybody coming one home? So there's also the Yerushalmi that mentions that the purpose is making the whole thing into one region. They all become one region. So you could argue that kinyan and dira both serve to make the whole thing one location. Right? But there's the question is that whether or not the Eruv creates one Reshut Yachid that everybody's using, or is it that it's simply that it breaks down all. We used to have many walls separating between locations. Now all these locations are now pushed into one. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. That by whether the mechanic be because you're all becoming one house, or because we are all becoming, or because we're all breaking out all the walls in between. But another way of phrasing it is that it's not which is mentioned which is implied by the Rambam and is mentioned by the Mishnah Yisachar, is that actually the way that it works. Sorry for the large amounts of notes, is actually that the way that it works is by means of by making the joint Eruv, it's symbolically everyone's. Not that it physically is one rishus now, but by everybody contributing their part to it, right? They're all explaining that I am now part of the collective. Right, so by doing so, you all become part of the collective, and you all have shared rights. So the question is whether or not those rights come to play on a monetary level, or they come together on a single residence level. But the main point being that it's more symbolic. And why was that? Why does Mishnah Yisachar mention that? He mentions that because if you say that it's all because it's one house, then you can run into issues. That's literally one house, only one house. If you start making multiple Eruvs, like in the case nowadays where typically every shul would have an Eruv, would have a some matzahs for the Eruv. That would mean that you've got a problem of making multiple Eruvs in one case. They should each forbid each other. So that would be a big problem. Why do we say this isn't an issue? The way it's not an issue is you say that by each Eruv you make, it's just simply you're saying that you're all part of the same collective. So even if multiple people were to make Eruvs, it shouldn't attract them all, because we're simply saying that we all want to be part of the larger Eruv. And yeah.
Rabbi, I have a question about the Eruv Chatzeros. Maybe I'm missing a big picture thing here, but if 8 families want to get together and there's 3 Chatzeros, then you still need, so you do it with the challahs or matzahs or whatever, but you still need the physical boundaries, don't you? Or no? Are you saying
correct? You do.
You still need
the issue that we were having with our case is that they didn't all, if they all had came together to make one Eruv with the 3 Chatzerot case, there would be no problems, right?
Right.
It would be allowed for everybody because now they are all properly joining into being one area. The problem would be so then that would have worked. The problem is that what happened is that they made 2 separate Eruvs didn't all connect. That was the two outer, one in the inner one. By doing so, they create issues because that means that they're not all one joint area. They're actually two areas that overlap but don't actually want to be one area. That's the problem.
Okay,
the problem we had with the Mavoi was that if you make it that because the people in the Chatzer would use the alleyway as a shortcut to get to Shvitz Rabim, it would mean that the error that they had tried to make in the Mavoi, in the alleyway, would have been no good.
But the error we have, the big question, with the city now, how does that work if we're not sharing challahs or matzahs now?
So the answer is we are sharing matzahs now. What happens is we have one person. When the rabbi, when the rabbi of the town, I'm not sure exactly. I don't know who makes it in Toronto. Forgive my not having looked that up yet. Typically, one rabbi in town will make the bracha on behalf of the whole town, and he has the matzahs that are sufficient for the requirement. That'd be enough to be okay for the whole eruv. And then. So he is making it. He's uniting all of the various Rishut Yasins together into one region that is then allowed for everybody to carry in that location, assuming that all the walls are properly set up. So that's how we don't run into issues. So then nowadays, we rarely run into issues of there being not insufficient bread. The question is, are the walls proper walls? Is the question nowadays. The way it used to be the Gemara is that a lot of people were very poor. Basically, they couldn't afford to leave. They didn't have enough bread, like to actually leave aside a whole section to say, oh, this bread is going to remain for the eruv for next week. It's like no, like we all have barely enough food to eat on Shabbos. So what happened is everyone would say like, okay, so you know what, my meal I'm having tomorrow for lunch, we'll put it as the eruv, then I'll come back tomorrow and I'll take it and I'll eat it. That's how it worked. So a lot of times, that's when they said like the question is I'm being mocked, but it's like yeah, because that bread's my lunch. And I don't have that much food. Like I'm poor, so like therefore you can't take my bread. And if you do, like that's like I'm like no, like that bread's mine. Nobody else can have it. Like I'm in air with my neighbor because like we both know we're going to take our bread back at the end. It'll be okay. I don't want it for the whole town because well I want to make sure I have my bread for lunch. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for asking because I guess I wasn't clear enough. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, so nowadays the issues are a little different than they used to be, but important. But that's why when the Rav of the town or the shul is making his eruv, or the Rav Mashri of the eruv, whoever's doing it, it's important that they have in mind that it should be for everybody to eat and have access to, and that all the walls are proper, because otherwise you'll have issues with the eruv that people can't carry. And we want to make sure that our eruv is accessible for all.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, everybody.
Easy fast, everybody.
Fast.
Good.
Scott.